did you do any preparation specifically for your disability before you went abroad?
Yes. So basically for me, I benefit from the cochlear implant, but in certain situations, like if it's like a lot of background noise, or if people have accents, like where I went in the Netherlands, it had the Dutch accent, so it was a little bit hard to understand, or group discussions and things like that. Sometimes having an interpreter helps. So I had to make preparations to get an interpreter, actually 2 of them. So I had a team of interpreters. So there was that. And then I also had to just make a couple of preparations, like for my electronics, for my cochlear implant, the battery chargers. I had to make sure I had the outlets that would adapt to the different plugs there. I also had to make a request for what is it? Like a vibrating alarm clock bed and a fire alarm thing, because the apartment that I was in only had the sound for the fire alarm. They didn't have a strobe. So I made a request for that, and they were able to accommodate me. So those were just a couple of the things that I had to do.
So in terms of your interpreters, you said you had 2 of them. So like,
Yeah.
why 2?
So I go to school. Well, I went to school at RIT. I just graduated this past May. So it is commonplace for interpreters to go in teams of 2, because doing the job of interpreting is a lot of work. There's a lot of processing, a lot of like translating, and a lot of mental work. So the way it works is that an interpreter will interpret for 20 minutes while the other is on break, and the other one is actually kind of still working, making notes on signs that need to be worked on, or concept that they need to look up, or they're there for feedback. And then after 20 minutes, the other one gets tagged in. They're like a tag team. Okay. So that was why I had 2 interpreters, because having just one would be so much work. And I was able to get interpreters pretty easily because being at RIT, I was able to request interpreters from them. Yeah, okay. That was like my biggest request for access services for studying abroad, was the interpreters.
Mm-hmm. Where did you study volunteer/work abroad? For how long were you there? What was your experience like? Were the people around you aware of your disability, and how did they react to it?
Mm-hmm. So I just mentioned this earlier. So I went to the Netherlands, specifically Amsterdam. I went there for 6 weeks in the summer 2019, so last year. So I studied, it was a summer like culture, society, gender sort of thing. So I did that because I minored in women and gender studies. My major was in biomedical science, and I picked that program because some of the classes they had were science-based. So it was a nice mix between my major and my minor. I was there for 6 weeks. So the people around me were definitely aware of my disability. I was pretty open about it. I mean, it's kind of hard not to be when I had 2 interpreters with me, you know. But everyone in the program was pretty understanding and accepting, although all of those other people had never been to RIT. They went to other schools from across the US. So they hadn't really had much interaction with a deaf person before. So they weren't very familiar with that, but they were still pretty open-minded. I think it kind of helps that all of us were kind of in a program for women and gender studies, and we were kind of like specializing in that. So everyone already had some knowledge of minorities and the disability community and things like that. So they were able to be more open-minded, and they ended up being really cool with it. So it was nice.
Was your mental health impacted negatively at any point while you were abroad because of anything related to your disability?
For the most part, no. but there was a period of time where my mental health was negatively impacted. It was just more so in the beginning. When I arrived there, I was like, well, everything's cool, just getting used to everything, like the newness of everything, it was very exciting. And then around the second or third day, this is when, like, after I had met my classmates and like we had gone out to dinner or whatever, and just being in that classroom environment with them again, kind of just really triggered a lot of, like trauma, because growing up in a mainstream school, I got through it okay, but I still kind of experienced some trauma from that, from always being left out and not included in the conversations, and just the general communication barrier because I wasn't using an interpreter during my high school days. So being in that environment again, after going to school at RIT for 3 years where I had full assets, like most of my friends were deaf, we were using sign language, and I had interpreters. So to go back into an environment that was very similar to high school was very jarring for me, because that's not what I was used to, because it had been a couple of years since I was in that environment. And so it just kind of like reminded me a lot of the same feelings that I used to have that I wasn't used to handling anymore. So around the first week, my mental health was pretty bad, but then after that, it kind of got better. I just kind of had to remember how to handle those feelings and also to advocate for myself more, because when I was at RIT, I never really had to say, oh, can you speak up louder? Can you say this again? Or tell them that I'm deaf. Please remember that. I never had to do that during college. So I have to start doing that again. And then things got better from there as they understood more about my disability as time went on. Because at first they didn't know too much about it, so I kind of had to educate them a little bit.